March of 2010, it was actually March 18th, the day after St. Patrick's Day, I go in to see Ike Skelton, who is the House Armed Services Committee chair. And I give him my understanding of what's happening in Afghanistan. And Skelton says to me, again, this is the man who is the Democrats controlled the House at the time. So this is the senior most elected official in the United States for oversight of the armed forces, right? This is the people. I mean, if you go up through the House is the People's Chamber, et cetera, et cetera. This is the man who is responsible for the armed forces for the people of the United States. You can argue in a way that's more important than the president, because as the president's commander in chief, it's his actions, and the Congress is supposed to be the check on those actions, right? And so here is the man who is at the top of that. And after giving him, after speaking to Skelton for, an hour or so, explaining him my understanding of what's happening in Afghanistan, where it's heading, what's gonna occur because of this escalation, he says to me, thank you for coming in. You are the first person who's ever come into my office and given me a negative briefing on the war in Afghanistan. And this is 8.5 years after the war has started, right? Or after the United States invasion. The war starts in the late 70s. So, I mean, like that type of villainry, that type of this man who's in charge of the Armed Services Committee, and I only got in there because of a man named Tom Andrews, who was a representative from Maine, who lost his spot in the Congress because he opposed a Democrat from Maine who opposed Bill Clinton over NAFTA. And Tom lost his spot in Congress in the 90s because of that. He stood up to Clinton, stood up to the unions who sold out so many people, right? Opposed NAFTA, has of course been proven right over time, right? But the only reason I got in there to see Skelton was because Tom knows Skelton, is a friend of his, et cetera, twists his arm, gets me in there. Come on, give this guy a chance, et cetera, et cetera. That's the only way I'm in there. Meanwhile, here's the top guy in Congress for the armed services who's saying that he has never heard a negative thing about the war in Afghanistan after 8.5 years. After General McChrystal, just 6 months before, had published a report saying that we are losing the war in Afghanistan. The head of the Armed Services Committee is going to tell me he's never heard a negative thing about Afghanistan. And the thing is, I believed him. I believe that no one else had ever gone into his office.